The Kli Yakar on Parashat Kedoshim.
Thank you very much.
It's chapter 19 in the book of Leviticus. Daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael. Well, first of all, Hashem spoke to Moses saying, speak to the entire assembly of the children of Israel, v'amarta leihem, and you shall say to them, Kedoshim tihiyu, you shall be holy. The rest of the verse is not just you shall be holy, Kedoshim tihiyu, ki kadosh ani, Hashem elokechem, for I am holy, Hashem, your God. Prat kol adat, it specifically says kol adat, right? What is a dat? A dat is assembly. And we know the definition of assembly being a group of at least 10 people from the spies. Okay? But he says
and you need an Edah for a minion and so forth.
Prat, specifically, kol adat. Ki eina Edah pachot mi'asara. As it's written in the Megillah, in the Masechet Megillah, you don't have less than 10. An Edah, by definition, means no less than 10. You have to have at least 10. And there's another concept written in also in Megillah. Ein davar shebekedusha pachot mi'asara. There's no words of kedusha with less. For example, we say Kaddish, right? We say Baruch Hu, we do Kriyas Torah, reading, public Torah reading. All these things require at least 10 Jews. Al-Kain Amar Khan, that's why it says here, this is according to the Kli Yakar, that's why it says here, Daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael, right? Speak to the entire assembly, el kol eda ve'eda, to every group of 10 people. And what should you say to them? Shiyu Kedoshim, you shall be holy. And this is perhaps another way we learn that you need 10 people to do things we call Dvarim Shebekadusha, words of holiness. Al Yidei Shehem Mutarim L'Kol Davar Shebekadusha. It's through the having the 10 people that we're actually permitted then to proclaim words of Kedusha, those things that you're required to have 10 Jews for. Asher Bo Mekadshim Shemo Yisbarach. What are those things that we call Dvar Shebekadusha that you need 10 people for? Those things where you sanctify or proclaim God's holiness through the 10 people. Zosh Amor, that's why it says Ki Kadosh Ani, for I am holy. Okay, this is a little bit like, you have to get your head around some of this, but that's how the Kli Yakar begins.
Okay, but what is the proof? How is that a proof that
I think from the words kol adat, as he first mentions specifically kol adat. The only way the holiness, because I am holy, the only way the holiness of Hashem can be brought down is starting with at least 10 people. Every time you have 10 people, you can begin to build on that level of holiness. Less than that, you're not permitted Dvar Shebekadusha, those things that bring Hashem's name into the world. I think that's quite clear. He says, look at the first 3 words, prat. It doesn't mean excluding, it means specifically. I think that's what he means. Specifically, because what it says, you shall be holy. How are you going to be holy? First you have to gather together 10 people. In fact, Rabbi Rabbi is going to be speaking in a few weeks from now, and I forget the exact title, but I asked him to speak on something called, Unity and Revelation, and he gave me back the title. It's fantastic. That only through unity can we really elevate and have a proper Matan Torah and Kabbalah Torah. A receiving of the Torah in its finest form through unity. And I think that's the message there. For you to be holy, you have to have at least 10 people. Obviously, not arguing and trying to kill each other. Right? in fellowship, in partnership. Then if we went on, right, let's just read on. V'hiktiv l'parsha zu inyan kedushat Yisrael, right? As an introduction to this parsha, there's this concept of, not just as an introduction, even before, right before, preceding this parsha, that you shall be holy, there's the whole concept of the holiness of the Jewish people. Like it says by Matan Torah, If we look back in Exodus chapter 19, verse 6, and I read these verses. 6 wasn't enough, although he just brings that. I read 5, and then I went back and read 4, and I was like, whoa, this is like really powerful stuff. You go back to, I said Shmos 19, verse 6. I'll read 6, but I want to go back. I'll start with 6. And you shall be to me a kingdom of ministers and a holy nation. Right? These are famous words. We know them in Hebrew. V'atem tiyu li mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh. You will be a kingdom of priests. He translates as ministers. And a holy nation, a goy kadosh. Ela haduvarim asher tidaber el bnei Yisrael. These are the things you're supposed to say to the children of Israel. Just go back one verse. And now, if you hearken well to me and observe my covenant, you shall be to me the most beloved treasure of all peoples, for mine is the entire world. I mean, it's mamish beautiful. Va'ato, like now, im shemo tishmelu b'koli, if you surely listen to my voice, ushmartem et briti, and you guard my covenant, you keep my covenant. Item li segula mikol hami, you will be a special treasured people from all the other nations. Ki li kol haaretz, because for me, the whole world belongs to me. I mean, these are just beautiful concepts. So he says, as we just said, Ki kamo shenemar kodem Matan Torah, just like it was mentioned before Matan Torah, this was like God's love call. He's telling the Jewish people how special they are to him. Kaf b'parsha zu nirmazu kol asar sedibros. So too in this parsha, our Parashat Kedoshim, okay, it hinted at all the 10 commandments. So over there in that parsha we just read, where God calls us, Matan Torah itself is the 10 commandments, the Luchot. So here it's also, you are holy, you shall be holy, and within the parsha there's some hint to the 10 commandments. Keda'amar Rebbe Levi, just like Rebbe says, Ein v'yikar Rabbah, see in the Midrash in v'yikar Rabbah, Al kain hikdim hakadusha. That's why it starts off or prefaced with this holiness. L'chavei b'leihem mitzvot, in order to, I'm going to use the word endear, to create this love, this embrace towards mitzvahs. We really cherish the mitzvahs. V'lomer sh'al yideihem, that through them, through du'alos kedusha, that's how we'll merit to be raised on a high level. Through the mitzvahs, they bring us to an intimate relationship with God. That's what the mitzvahs do. And they bring us into a higher madrega, a higher level. V'al tomar she'kedusha milsa zutartahi. Now one should not say that mitzvahs are zutarta, means they're small, right? That you shouldn't say that this holiness is something very small. Ki kadosh ani, because I am holy. So you may think it's something little. No, this is huge. As my favorite nominee, hopefully, for the Republican presidential election. Huge! Right? It's huge. Ki kadosh ani, I am God. Hakaton be'inechem l'damu tatsura liyotra kaviyachol. This is a rhetorical question. Something small in your eyes to compare the Creator that created you. This is like the Creator of all existence, and you're going to make light of it? No. Holiness is something very heavy and big and take a lot of consideration. Chazal said in Vayikra Rabbah, Rabbi Seinu Zalamu, Kol Makom Shetimsa Geder Erva. This is a running theme. Any place that you find a fence, a guarding against promiscuity. Erva doesn't just mean nakedness, but a forbidden type of nakedness. Sham Timsa Kedusha. That's where you will find holiness. He runs the theme a lot. So in other words, even the word Kedusha, Kadosh, actually means separate. That, we are separate. God says, He commands our separateness, and therefore we are holy. He's not going into that right now, but he's just explaining every place you find a fence, whether it's man-made or God-made, right, against sexual promiscuity, you're inviting holiness, you're creating holiness, but you find holiness, let's say, at this point. Ukuvar yadata, you already know that the language, shaloshon geder moira al hadavar hamutar mitzad hadin, v'oisin siyah v'geder lihitrachet meaning Yisrael. That the lashon, the language of geder, which is a fence, teaches or reflects upon the idea that something is actually permissible from the law. In other words, within the law, something may be permissible, but nevertheless, we create, or there is made a fence, siyag v'geder. Siyag is another type of fence. Actually had a copy. If you don't mind, this is like an original, so just don't write on it.
Okay, yeah, this one.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Sorry, I got lost. That it's something is really permissible from the letter of the law, mitzad hadin, but nevertheless, osin siyag geder, in order to remove ourselves or distance ourselves from an isser. So something can be permissible, and yet there's a concept of distancing yourself from that which is permissible in order that you don't fall short,
Creating a fence?
That's what we're talking about, exactly. So you don't fall into what really is forbidden. So there can be a fence against something which is actually permissible, so you don't go that extra yard and mess up. Al-Kin Amru, that's what they mean when they say, Shekol Makom Shatamot Geder Erva. Every place where you find this type of offense against sexual promiscuity, Sham Timsa Kedusha, that's where you will find the holiness. Kiko Kedusha, all this holiness, Hainu, Af B'davar Hamutar, we're speaking about even where it's actually permissible. Nevertheless, Kamo Shamar Chazal says in Yevamos, Kadesh Atzmecha B'mutar Lach. You should create this holiness for yourself, even in those things that are totally permissible to you. I'll give you examples. Food. Food may be permissible. We're talking about kosher food, but overeating, overindulgence is problematic. Sex, too much. Sex could be permissible in certain cases, in most cases, right? You're married. But all day long, every day, could
Not
be...
only permissible, but it's a very major mitzvah.
I just said, all day, every day, may be problematic. So I want to separate. Yes, it not only may be a mitzvah, of course it's a mitzvah at times, but it may be, if one gets involved with it 24 hours, 7 days a week, it may actually be damaging. How? I'm not going to go into that. The Rabbi talked about it, other people talk about it, maybe even psychologists talk about it. Okay? It probably is. Anything that's permissible, taken to the extreme, can be damaging. Moshe, the doctor. You have anything to add?
It's always true.
Okay. Okay.
Are you Rackfield's brother?
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
And the old city.
So I know two people
In the
there.
old city. He looks like him, right?
A little.
Not much.
It's the height. Kikol Kedusha Hana Abda Ramuta, like Chazal said, Yevamos, Kadesh Atzmecha B'mutar Lach. You should sanctify yourself, or let's use the word separate yourself from that which is even permissible to you. Kedushat HaNazir Yokiach. The holiness of what the Nazir does proves our point. What does the Nazir do? He takes basically a vow. He doesn't specify what he's separating himself from, but by becoming a Nazir, he is automatically separating himself from certain things that are mutter, right? Whether it's wine, grape juice in this case as well, haircuts, right? Going to a cemetery.
Sex is not one of them.
Not in this case, Moshe. Al-Kain Amru, therefore, but the concept is something that's permissible. It's not like we're talking about bread on Pesach. It's not like we're talking about food on Yom
It's a
Kippur.
problematic thing anyway, because a Nazir, they might call him Kadosh, but he also has to bring a korban chata.
Okay, so that's not our subject.
Because he's sinning by denying himself. And the Maharal says it's a little bit like suicide.
So that kind of disrupts everything we're talking about. So I'm going to take that and just put it aside for now, because he's not
like being a nun.
he's not going to go there, right?
Yeah.
And or he hasn't gone there yet.
Okay.
So if he goes there, we'll let you know. You'll be the first to know. In the meantime, what he's talking about is setting up fences and guards, even against that which is permissible. And he uses this extreme example as proof that, and we know, what do we say about this Nazir? He's like, yeah, maybe on one side he has to bring a sin offering. He's not called a sinner. He has to bring a sin offering, but he's called like holy like a Kohen Gadol.
There's some fences that separate types of Jews, though.
And we're not going to talk.
I'm just saying.
because that's not what we're about.
Okay.
So that would be off topic.
Okay.
So he says the Kedusha of the Nazir actually proves our point. Okay? Therefore it says, V'makom shenizkar geder erva atam motze Kedusha. Where you actually find this fence, and we're talking about, okay, well, if something is permissible, you set up this fence, you find this Kedusha, which is holiness. V'chein b'matan Torah. We find this if you look back, we were just talking about in Exodus 19, verse 15, where it says, what do you have to do before 3 days, there's a 3-day preparation before we receive the Torah. And it says, Al tikshu et el isha. So chapter 19, verse 15. I'll just read 14 and 15. Moses descended from the mountain to the people. He sanctified the people, and they washed their clothing. That's 14. He said to the people, be prepared after a 3-day period. Do not draw near a woman. In other words, separate yourself from your wives. Now these women are obviously permissible. But in this case, we're about to be elevated at such a high level, there requires a certain amount of separation. Okay? And I'll read it in Hebrew. V'yomer el ha'am, he said to the people, you nechonim l'shloshet yamim, right? Be prepared for these 3 days. Al tigshu el isha. Do not, I'm not going to use the word approach because there's going to be another word, but don't touch. How does he translate it? Do not draw near a woman. But don't approach, don't touch. Okay? So he says, Dahainu v'muter lahem. They were certainly permissible, they were married, right? There's no reason why not. But in terms of preparation towards reaching a higher level to be able to receive the Torah, they were required to separate from their wives. Al kain karam, that's why the Jewish people are called what? Goy kadosh. Goy kadosh means a separate people, or let's say, a holy people. We are a holy nation. We're also a separate nation. And there's verses that describe that separateness. Chen kan ne'amar, so too now in our verse, well actually chapter in our, it's not our chapter, it's the chapter before. Our chapter begins with 19. If you go back to chapter 18, verse 6 in Leviticus. So this is under the laws, we're talking about who you can and cannot be involved with in a sexual relationship. It says, any man shall not approach his close relative to uncover nakedness. I am Hashem. Okay? Ish, any man. El kol she'ar basro, any close relative. Lo tikravu legalot erva, should not come close, should not approach, should not come close to uncover the nakedness. Ani Hashem, I am God. So he just quoted the pasuk, Lo tikravu legalot erva, kriva hamevi lide gilo arayas. I think what he means by kriva, it's the approaching, that alone brings, or that could bring the illicit sexual relationship. So there's a guard against even the approaching. Who geder v'siyag le'erva, this being a fence towards the actual act itself. V'chein isha zona v'chalola, so too by a woman who we'll call a prostitute, or a halola in this case. Sure. And a woman who a Kohen cannot marry, someone who was with a non-Jew. Let's just keep that short. Medabrim mutar l'Yisrael. Even though they're permissible to a regular Israelite, meaning a say a reformed prostitute, let's say, yeah, she did tshuva. There's no reason why an Israelite cannot marry her, but a Kohen cannot. Okay? And same thing with a halala.
This is not like marrying a divorced woman, marrying a divorced woman? Is it,
Cohen is not allowed to marry a divorced woman.
First of all,
So-
let's say she was never married. She was just a prostitute.
right, so I'm making the analogy that because she was not,
It's not fitting, well, I don't know all the details, but basically it's not fitting for the Kohen to marry a prostitute, even though she was never married before.
okay, so I feel,
Okay, kind of makes sense.
Yeah,
So,
right.
so too, we, the Jewish people, are a goy kadosh, we're holy people. Even though things are permitted to us, we may make fences. Okay? V'kohen tzarich gager v'seyag la'asur lo af hamut Israel. And the Kohen is required to create these fences, or it's necessary for the Kohen to have these fences, even for things that are permissible for the regular Jew, the regular Israel. Kedei lekachav gedushia Torah, in order that he should be more sanctified, or in order to bring his level of holiness up. Harvey, you want to add anything to that so far? Okay. If anybody has better translations for anything, please feel free
The
to.
Kohanim can be with a widower.
Again.
Just a Cohen Gadol not.
Just what?
Cohen Gadol.
Uma sha'amar. And what does it say? What did we see the rest of the verse say? Kedoshim to you. It actually says, you shall be holy. Now the question is, Kedoshim to you, I'll go back to the actual translation they give us here. Chapter 19, verse 1. You shall be holy. Is this a command? Or is this a statement that you are holy? It sounds like you shall be is a command, correct? So he uses, there's inferences of both here, okay? Yesh b'mashmu'uto lashon tzivoy, u'lashon hoda'ah ha'inyan. There's both inferences. You can actually understand that statement, you shall be holy. Number one is a command. And number two, it can be understood as a statement of fact. Just like there's another, it says, Vatem tiyuli mamlechet kohanim, yivoy goy kadosh. In the previous, right, I mentioned in chapter 18, verse 6, you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. What is that? Is that a command or is that a statement of fact? It's the same language. You shall be to me. So he says, Shehu hadat ha'inyan. It's not a command. It's a statement of fact. Kach hodia lehem hakadosh baruch hu matan skaran shel hagdurin me'arayot. That what this statement of fact is that God is informing them the amount of reward they're going to receive for creating, I'm talking about the Am Yisrael, the nation of Israel, for creating these fences against that which is actually permitted to us. And that through creating these fences, you will be holy to your God. Now, we'll take just a short break just to explain what you mentioned earlier. If you're talking about something that's a sin, that you cannot take a sin and say that's a fence. So if Jews are creating, let's say, fabricated types, man-made types of things that are actually a sin, that doesn't make the other group holier. In fact, that would bring them down. Okay, so that wouldn't be a good example for this. I mean, I understand you're concerned about it, and that you come to Rabbi Braido's shir and find out how we can create unity. That would be a sin. One of the major principles in Judaism is do not treat others like you wouldn't want to be treated. Treat someone else like you would want. So before anybody acts on anything, is that how I would want to be treated? I'm not going to act like that to someone else. Okay? So, and then who is that someone else? If they're, observant and doing mitzvahs, there's no way you should be able to create any of these boundaries.
Right.
But if they are, let's say, sinning in public, you may, okay, we're not going to get into that, you may have to create certain natural boundaries.
You have to have a fence between Gentiles and Jews to a certain degree.
At certain times, yeah. In a lot of cases. Okay. But anybody who's in the process of converting, that's already...
Depends how
let's
sincere and
not,
legitimate
we
it
don't,
is.
let's
I'm just
leave,
saying.
leave that for the based in. If someone opens a case in a teak and a Poston, we trust them. Ish imo, this is like really fascinating. I told my wife, she wanted to know what I'm going to talk about tonight. So hopefully we'll get to it on the next page. It's fascinating. Ish imo va'aviv tira'u ve'eshab sosai tishmeru. So this is the next verse. Every man shall revere his mother and his father. You shall observe my Sabbaths. I am Hashem your God. Ish imo va'aviv tira'u ve'eshab sosai tishmeru. Ani Hashem Elokecha. I am Hashem your God. So Rashi explains here. He has many explanations on this verse. It's quite long. Just one part of it. If someone's father said to them, and maybe in a lot of our cases, our fathers are not as observant as we are. If one of our parents, if your father says to you, desecrate the Shabbos, Al tishma lo, you do not listen to him. Right? You have a mitzvah of kibbut aveim, or here in this case, right? Fear them, revere them. Doesn't mean you have to listen to them if they go against the Torah.
So that commandment to honor your parents, in an example like that, you would
You
not honor their wishes.
you see, you're not honoring their wishes when they say to you, "I need you to, cook me. I want you to cook me
Shabbat.
on Shabbat." You say, "Dad, I'm really sorry. It's no go. I'll give you some prepared cereal with milk. No problem, but I can't really cook you this."
Depends on the extenuating circumstance.
But you could, excuse me?
Depends on the extenuating circumstance. If your father's sick and
Okay,
he has
so
to
that,
handle
yeah,
it.
so
I'm
that's
just saying,
not your
there's
father,
always
that's anybody.
extenuating
It's not,
circumstances.
that's outside, not your father. It has nothing to do with your father. It has to do with anybody who is in a life-threatening
Right.
situation. Of course, you can call a doctor, drive to the hospital, do whatever you have to do. Okay. And in Parashat Kedoshim, Rashi explains over there, "V'dehiktim shmirat Shabbat lebinyan hamishkan." Now over there in that portion, Kedoshim, when Moses gathers everybody and tells them to start gathering material for building the tabernacle, and then you see all the details about the actual malacha, the building, for the next few parshiot. Nevertheless, it also says 6 days work may be done, but on the seventh day shall be holy for you, a day of complete rest for Hashem. For whoever does work, what we call malach in Hebrew, that's the word used in the Torah, anyone who does work, malacha on it, shall be put to death. Just for those people that have any question that malacha is very specific kinds of work, not just anything, because you're talking about being put to death, right? And if you're going to be put to death, there has to be something very well known, right? You can't just guess. If someone's going to be put to death, it's got to be, it's part of an oral Torah, what they are, what they always were, and not to be in doubt. Okay?
They have to get the warning and everything.
Yeah, that's not, yeah. So the main point here is that you have what we call Havdama, something that came first. Shehikdim, there was something that came before, and then something came out. You have two commands. One is keep Shabbat, and then build the Mishkan. Or here we're talking about why did he bring it in? Because our verse says, a man, his mother and his father, they shall fear. We're going to get into it. And then right away it says, and my Shabbases they shall keep. So you have the Havdama, the introduction, or the first part of the verse talking about honoring your parents, and then keeping Shabbos. So you would think that whatever comes first always takes precedence, okay, which is usually the case. And then we're going to discuss it right now. And then you have something else. So what pushes off what? So
Which number commandment is keep YIBONEH, and which number commandment is keep the Shabbos?
well, keep the Shabbos is number 4.
Yeah.
And kibbut aveim, if I'm not mistaken, is 5.
5?
And why were you asking? Oh, in terms of that?
In terms of like which one came first, and
Ah.
came first, the opposite came first.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. Okay. So here we say like this. Let me just go back to. So Rashi says over there, that Shmir Shabbos comes before the building of the Mishkan. And what is it trying to tell you when it says that? She'ein binyan Mishkan doches Shabbos. That the Mishkan does not push off Shabbos. Right? Shabbos takes precedence. So we hear from that. Shema Minah Shahamukdemet doche lemacheret. That whatever comes first always pushes off what comes second. But he says there's a difference here. Shanei hacha. First of all, it says shehitkel b'lashon yachid. We're actually going to start taking this thing apart a little bit. The ish, that's a man, his mother, imo, va'aviv, his father, tira'u, they shall fear. What is a man? Think about the pronouns here, right? The structure. A man, his mother, his father, they shall fear. So who's they?
They the parents or they the...
We're talking about the children. It's a man. Put that aside. Then, V'siyam b'lashon Rabbi, tira'u, they shall fear. And then also the same thing, because Tishmeru is going on the word ish again, right? Even though ish is not said, ish is understood. And a man, my Shabbos is, they shall fear. So who's they? He says it's also language of Rabbi. So Bishlam Atiru, I understand when it comes to they shall fear, that's going on a man and a woman. Meaning a female is also obligated to honor or fear her parents. Okay? So it's like when it says ish, we know it's talking about male and female. They shall fear their parents. But when it comes to keeping Shabbat, one second, I have to get back into the space. Compare Etzel Shabbos, but when it comes to Shabbos, I'll just go back to what Rashi says over there. How do we know that a woman's also obligated to? Let's just look it up real quick so we have it clear. In Rashi it says, Imo va'aviv tira'u. That, right, they shall revere his mother and his father. So here Rashi says, Kan hikdim aim la'av. This is going to be very important for what we're going to talk about. Here the verse puts mother ahead of father. Lufi shegoyel lefanov, since it was revealed before Hashem himself. Hashem knew. Shaben yireh et aviv yoter mi'imo. That the son will revere his father more than his mother. Therefore, what the verse does, it emphasizes revering the mother. That's why she's first when it comes to the mitzvah of fearing your parents. But there's another mitzvah called honoring your parents. It's a separate mitzvah, by the way. You would have thought, right? It's one mitzvah. There's another mitzvah called kavod, kivud aveim. So you have a mitzvah to fear your parents. You also have a mitzvah to give honor to your parents. One is action and one is refraining, by the way. I'll give you an example. Action, feeding them, clothing them, standing up and meeting at the door and, escorting them. Fearing is not contradicting them, not sitting in their chair. Okay. So when it comes to honor, but with regard to honor, the kavod hikdim av la'ain. We see that the father is in the verse, comes first. When it comes to fear, the mother is put first in the verse. When it comes to honor, the father's placed first in the verse. Why? Because lefi shegol lefanov, God knew, haben mechabed et imo, the son honors his mother more, yoter mi'aviv, more than he honors his father. Ready for these? Bivnei shemishadalto b'dvarim. Because what she does is she wins him over with pleasant words. Everyone knows the mother is more, it's true in all cases, this is the general. She's more pleasant to deal with. The father could be a little bit more strict. Just very general. Obviously there's much more that goes into that. But then in the next part, I think is also relevant. And you shall observe my Sabbaths. Ve'et shabsosai tishmeru. Semach Shmir Shabbos, there's a smuchut, a juxtaposition of observing Shabbos, l'moira'av, to the reference one should have towards one's parents. By saying to you, what does it say to you? Afa pi, shehiz harticha, even though I, God, warned you, al mora'av, about revering your parents. Im yomer lecha, if your father would say to you, chalel et Shabbat, desecrate Shabbos, al tishvelu lo, don't listen to him. V'chein b'shar kol ha-mitzvahs, that's true by all mitzvahs, not just Shabbat. Okay? So what was he saying over here about the mother coming first? And he mentions, let me just get back into the
Can you
language.
correct your father or just not listen to him?
There's a way that you can. And that's not for now, but there's a way with respect. I'll give you an example. If your father's a Talmid Chacham, right, you could say, Father, did you teach me this one time? I'm going to review it. Can you help me, with the lesson? So then she should come on his own that he realized he made a mistake. If your father's not a Talmid Chacham, it's a whole other story. So we just said over here that the word tira'u is going on both male and female. Actually, I'm not sure it's in this Rashi, I think it's in the other Rashi, but that the woman also has to honor her husband. So you have the man who's going to revere or have fear or honor towards his parents, that the woman also has that towards her husband. So she's kind of included, right? It's like automatic. So that we understood. About Etzel Shabbos, but when it came to Shabbos, Lama Amar Tishmeru B'Lashon Rabbi. Why does it say they should guard in a plural way?
Because it says Isha.
Mali Isha. What do I do with the man? What do I do with the woman? It made sense when it came to fearing your parents, because the married woman has to anyway follow her husband. So of course she's going to as well honor her parents, honor her in-laws even. Ella v'adai tishmeru is koel ben va'av. So when it comes to guarding Shabbat, it's not talking about the male and female anymore, but it's talking about the father and son. That's why we're talking about the son doesn't have to listen to his father. When his father tells him.
He doesn't have to listen to his wife. In other words,
That's not what he's going to say at the end. I just wanted to clue you on. I told my wife what we were going to talk about tonight. She was fascinated. And Yimir Hashem should get to see this. But let's just say Tishmeru, since we already discussed the male-female part, now it's teaching about the father-son part, and therefore it's telling you, Shata v'avicha chayavim b'kvodi. Both of them, both the father and the son, are obligated God's honor. And that's why Shabbos takes precedence, and the son does not listen to the father, that overrides God's honor. And if you're bothered, why is Shabbos specified, pointed out, more than any other mitzvahs in the Torah? Right? You have honor your parents, then Shabbos. Or keep Shabbos and then build the Mishnah. Why Shabbos keep coming up is like the main, one of the main mitzvahs that you learn the lesson from. The Fishatam Shal Mitzvahs Kibbutz Ve'aim is, because the main reason, I'm using the word main, he didn't say main, because the reason for the mitzvah, the commandment of honoring your parents is this. It's fitting to distribute, to apportion honor to the one that brought you out to the light of existence. Okay? That's your parents. Hallohu avicha kanech v'hu osech. Isn't it your father who created you and made you? Ve'ech lo tichalo kavod l'mi shehim tziecha. So of course not. Your father had a portion in that, but there were three partners in man. One of them is God. So how can you not apportion kavod to the one who really brought all existence into being? He's the one who even brought your own parents into existence, right? And it's true, your parents are a partner in your creation, but there are three partners. Aside from him being God, you wouldn't have any existence whatsoever. So you have to give him precedence, or at least the same amount of honor, if not more. And what does Shabbos do? Shabbos is your way of showing honor to God. This teaches us, or reminds you, or you're basically proclaiming the world was created something from nothing. God created the existence without God. V'himtzi HaKadosh Baruch Hu la'or havaya otcha ve'et avicha. It was God who brought into existence you and your father, not just you, also your father, into the light of existence. V'yomer l'cha avicha halal Shabbat. If your father would say to you, desecrate the Shabbos, and why would he say that to you? Kedei lata'at bilivcha sha'olam kadmon u'bilti mechudash. I'm assuming this is what he means to say, that your father wants to create within you a mistake, meaning that there's no reason to believe in God. I mean, why else would your father say, desecrate Shabbat? To create this mistake within your heart that the world always existed and never had a beginning. Right? Because that's what Shabbos is about, remembering that God created the world. So if you're just desecrating Shabbos, it's like you're totally dissing God. Your father is based by telling you to desecrate Shabbat, saying, I'm your only father. There's no other partner. Okay, your mother, but forget that third partner that created the spirit within you and created the entire universe and the world. Give me the honor instead of him, instead of God. V'yomer kol zeh l'patotcha shetivata rotzon avicha sheb'shamayim nei rotzono lo ta'ovel v'lo tishma. And why is he saying this? In order to seduce you to get rid of doing God's will, to stop you from doing the will of your Father who's in heaven on account of his own will, meaning your Father's will. And the command is basically, don't fall for it, don't desire to do that, don't listen to him, your Father. Ki be'emet hu yisbrach av kulanu, because really God is the Father of all of us. V'chayev ata levata ratzon avicha mivnei ratzon yisbarach. You're actually obligated to remove the will of your father and do God's will. Ki atav avicha chayavim bikvodo. Because both you and your father are obligated to do God's will, to honor God. Aval im yomar lecha avicha la'avur avera acheret. If your father should demand of you, should tell you to transgress any command, not just Shabbat, pshita shalot tishmalo kozman sharosh nizrucha kayam, then it's very obvious you should not listen to him the whole time, if you want to help me with these words, that your head, something about your crown is in existence. Sharosh nizrucha kayam. I'm assuming that we're talking about the spirit and the brain, as long as you still have a head on your shoulders. You should guard the Shabbat according to all of its laws, and believe that the world was created from nothing. Ki av echad lekulanu. We really have one Father. And regarding this, there's no reason to even command you. Zulat im yavo lechalok al hashorish merosh amuna. Aside from, or besides this, if you come to distribute, to mechalek, to apportion, or does this mean to argue with? Lechalok is to argue with, right?
Chalok is to apportion.
But maybe here, if you come to, I think it means to argue on, in this case,
Maybe.
On the root of the most important part of faith, like hashoresh merosh amuna, the most fundamental principle in faith, that would be most important. Al zeh ata tzarich zeruz biyotcha. That's why you're required this extra. You would think you wouldn't need the command, but you know what? You do need to be commanded. Your father is a very powerful figure in your life, whether you like it or not. And therefore you need this extra encouragement from God not to listen to him. Al kein metzinu b'kol makom smichot the Shabbos lemitzvos kibbut aveim. That's why you find in several places this juxtaposition of the mitzvah keeping Shabbos next to honoring your parents. Gam ima Shabbos moira kibbut ha'av rishon l'kol notzar. Also, that Shabbos itself teaches you, reflects on the honor that you must give to the first Father of all creation, which is God himself. Yiklo Asmichot Od. And included in this juxtaposition is one more point. Shlosha Shutafim Asher Ba'adam. There are three partners in man. The Father, the Mother, and God. Now I would like to, with time permitting, Moshe, take these next 8 lines, because this is fundamental in today's world. We live in a world full of confusion, feminism, and this will really help us understand how we need to treat our wives. Okay? Uma shamatim b'moira imo la'aviv. From the very fact that you have the preference, or it says first, it's stated first, by fearing your parents, it first mentions your mother, and then your father. When it comes to honoring, it first says your father, and then your mother. And why? Well, we already saw in Rashi why. He's going to give a different explanation. Also, the man is obligated to honor his wife. You hear this, everybody? The man is obligated to honor his wife. Ka'amru Chazal says in YIBONEH, Le'olam yechabed adam ishto yoter megupo. That really, like in absolute sincerity, it's an absolute fact. Le'olam, a man should honor his wife more than his own body, more than himself. Now, you may be mistaken to think, you might have thought mistakenly, that, you know what, maybe it's not so, the Torah is not so strict. You don't have to take it so seriously about one honoring the other. In this case, we're talking about the man honoring his wife, although it doesn't say, it says it in the masculine. Even the father is obligated to honor his own mother, right? And honor your mother. You're the child. Your father is now obligated to honor your mother. You have to honor your father. Your father himself has the chiyuv to honor his wife, which is your mother. That's why it says Av first. To tell you, that his honor shall be greater upon you just as the honor towards your mother. Even though, right, a man would honor his mother more, so that's why Av comes first. You have to honor him also, but unequal. There are going to be halachas, there are going to be differences. We're not going to get into them now. Av kol pi shnechem chayav mikvodahem. So what do you have is you have to honor your mother, and your father has to honor your mother. You both have to honor your mother. Moira, when it comes to fear, then she needs to have the proper, I'm going to say, healthy fear of her husband on her. Now you might have thought mistakenly. You might have thought that having a healthy fear, the Torah is not so strict about. No, that's why that's why aim comes first, telling you that nevertheless she also has to have the proper fear for your father as well. That she has to, your wife, or in the case of your mother, has to have also a healthy fear of the opposite sex. Okay, any questions? It was a little tough piece, but fundamental. These are fundamental.
What's the difference in fear and honor again?
One is, let's say, when I use the word positive, negative mitzvahs, there's no negative mitzvahs. It's just a way of interpreting what we call aseh, velot aseh, do's and don'ts. There are do's and don'ts. So kavod is one of those we call do's. Fear is under the category of don't. So the examples of honor, you stand up when they walk in the room, they come, they park their car, they got packages, you run out. You help them. You cook for them. Right? You cover them with blankets, you dress, whatever it is that's positive, right? And then there's, I don't like the word negative, but don'ts, let's say. Don't sit in their seat. Don't contradict them, right? These are what we call don'ts. That's in the lotaseh. So, just like Shabbat has shamor v'zachor. One's positive, one's negative. I don't like those terms. One's do's and one's don't, right? Zachor is to remember. Shamor is to guard against, but refrain, right? Anyway,
The laughter was just a memory of, when my mother used to come home and we three boys were still, living at home in high school. She would call out almost from the driveway or from just when you walk
Martha.
up. I know, she said, I have grocery bags, come help me. So we fight to see who would be the volunteer.